Coming to you straight from Manila, Philippines, this is RiseUp With Esther. Today we're talking about the effects of global warming on the global economy. The global economy loses trillions of dollars in years following El Nino. Global economic losses for this century will amount to $84 trillion as global warming amplifies. 2023 alone could hold the global economy back by as much as $3 trillion by 2029. A study published in the journal Science in May this year found some of the most intense past El Nino events cost the global economy more than $4 trillion over the following years. As the climate change could increase the frequency and strength of future El Nino events, the study authors project that global economic losses could amount to $84 trillion by the end of the 21st century, even if current pledges to reduce carbon emissions are met. And the impact, the report found, will most burden lower-income nations. The fact that these events are so costly was definitely a surprise, said Chris Callahan, lead and author and doctoral candidate in geography at Dartmouth College. There are these persistent depressions in economic growth that lasts for 5 or even 10 years because of the strength of those extreme events. About every 3 to 5 years, ocean temperatures in the eastern and central Pacific Ocean heat up, telltale signs of a phenomenon known as El Nino, and create a domino effect of extreme weather across the globe, sometimes lasting for a year. Along the eastern Pacific, regions like southern United States can experience above average rain and even damaging landslides. On the opposite side of the ocean, places like Indonesia and Southeast Asia experience drought, which can lead to devastating wildfires. Effects in other regions include devastating floods, dying crops, a surge of tropical diseases, and plunging fish populations, all of which can affect local and global economies. Forecasters at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are anticipating a strong El Nino event later this year in 2023, as ocean temperatures have already hit record highs. The last El Nino, which arrived in 2016, coincided with the hottest global temperatures on record, wildfires, polar ice melt, and more. The authors of the new study estimate the 2023 El Nino event could hold back the global economy by $3 trillion over the next 5 years, a figure not included in the published research. If you have weather and climate hazards impacting your energy and transport sectors, that's just going to ripple through the economy in a bunch of different ways, said Justin Munkin, co-author and assistant professor of geography at Dartmouth College. Callahan and Mankin analyzed the growth in national gross domestic product per capita from 1960 to 2019, focusing on the years following El Nino events and its counterpart, La Nina, which is characterized by cooling of ocean waters in the same Pacific region. They found around 56% of countries experienced significant decreases in growth even 5 years after an El Nino event. La Nina events sometimes showed benefits in the global economy, like shifting tropical rainfall to more continental areas, boosting agriculture, and reducing wildfire risk in such areas. But those increases were heavily outweighed by losses from El Nino events. The two largest El Nino events over the last 60 years occurred in 1982 to 1983 and 1997 to 1998 and racked up losses of $4.1 trillion and $5.7 trillion respectively, more than 5 years later. Those years also coincided with large financial crises that contributed to the losses, but the team still found significant declines in the longer-term GDP if those were excluded from the analysis as well. Most of the losses were felt by nations in closer proximity to the phenomenon, which are often developing or lower income. Resident in Peru, for example, would have been $1,246 greater by 19% higher in 2004 if the 1998 El Nino had not occurred. Tropical countries, including Ecuador, Brazil, and Indonesia, lost about 5 to 19% GDP per capita. We know El Nino is costly. We are showing that these costs are far far greater than we understood them to be previously, said Mankin. The study's loss estimate for the 1997 to 98 El Nino, for example, was sometimes 100 times higher than the previous estimates that did not account for cumulative losses in following years. Callahan said that places like the United States also feel a discernible economic toll, experiencing about a 3% loss in income growth following the 1982 to 83 and 1997 to 98 events. The team also projected what the economic toll of future El Nino events could look like under various global warming scenarios. Using a middle-of-the-road climate model, they calculated about an $84 trillion loss from 2020 to 2099, even if current greenhouse gas pledges are met. That amount is estimated to be about a 1% reduction in global economic output over the 21st century, but certain countries could experience higher costs and losses. There are places like Peru, Ecuador, and Indonesia that are experiencing losses that are far larger than the global number, said Callahan. This includes some of the most vulnerable people on the planet, some of the people that don't have the kind of adaptive capacity that places like the United States and Europe have. Of course, the projection leaves a lot of wiggle room since it highly depends on how much or little nations reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Callahan also acknowledges that climate models depicting the future intensity and frequency of El Nino events are still flawed in a lot of ways. He said it remains to be seen whether or not global warming will actually intensify El Nino in the way that science is debating right now. I found it interesting that even under the most optimistic emission scenarios, this study still projects major economic losses under predicted future El Nino change, said Madison Schenkel, a paleoclimatology doctoral candidate who was not involved in the research. This signals that, in addition to climate and emission mitigation efforts, it will be imperative to invest in adaptation and resilience initiatives as well. Mike McFadden, a senior scientist at NOAA and who was not involved in the research, said the study was very insightful and provocative. He said looking at economic repercussions years down the line leads to a radical revision of some previous estimates of economic losses. Others, however, are slightly more skeptical of the estimates. Climate economist Gary Yohe told the Associated Press the enormous estimates cannot be explained simply by forward-looking accounting. McFadden said he isn't sure what will happen for this upcoming El Nino. If it's a big one, like 1982 to 83 or 1997 to 98, then he expects lingering damage and effects over many years. If the event is more subdued, then the consequences may be more muted with a shorter recovery time. Either way, prepare for the worst and hope for the best, he said. And that's what we have. Thank you so much for being with us. More episodes coming right up.